Everyone, welcome to another What I Would Have Done Thursday. Uh, I have to upload this video late because I was rather busy yesterday, but I will be sure to upload this video as well as Friday's video too. So let's get started by talking about what I wanted to talk about for this What I Would Have Done Thursday, and that's Die Another Day. James Bond movie. Now this one I think suffers a lot of problems as far as a James Bond film goes. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of look into this one in particular and, kind of see what I would have done had I been in the director's chair, had I had some kind of influence as far as the ultimate final product. So without further ado, let me kind of go through with you the various problems that I think existed through this film and what I would have done to change them so that we would have maybe not as bad as a James Bond film that we got. And I'm sure there's still some people who still find some enjoyment from this film, and I can understand why. For me personally, it's dumb yet kind of entertaining. It's kind of like Fast and Furious. It has that fun guilty pleasure aspect to it. But at the same time, again, a lot of problems. So I thought I would go through this and kind of address the things that could have been done had to make this Bond film, I think, a little bit more smarter than it really was. First off, right out of the gate, just getting this one out of the way, a lot of people were upset at the Madonna theme. Some people may enjoy it for what it is. I personally think that song should have been completely scrapped, because it just sounds so, it just sounds like, this very poppy, auto-tune, generic early 2000s, kind of approach does not suit Bond really well. Especially considering the fact that when you think of a James Bond film, you oftentimes think of certain themes that were certain songs that sort of centered around establishing sort of the theme of the film or giving it some interesting sort of commentary, and usually they're done with a sense of sort of intelligence to them, like they're very slick, they have maybe a certain amount of edge to them, or certain dark elements may be associated with them. But unfortunately, this song, I think, falls completely flat, especially considering the fact that it is showcased while James Bond is being tortured. Like, it's kind of awkward to watch, and hear this song in the background at the same time. But I think the visuals are actually interesting, because we see him kind of like being tortured, but then, there's, how like in James Bond's, theme songs, they usually have like silhouettes of pretty women or something like that, and, the silhouettes are kind of like helping him, through the time of torture. And you think to yourself that this was a good idea, as far as creativity, but then when you insert it with this song, it just ruins the potential of the scene to work. So I really think they should have gone for something a little bit more dark, while at the same time maybe having some kind of uplifting aspect, because again, on the one hand, he's being tortured, and at the same time, the sexy, pretty women that actually don't exist, they're just kind of silhouettes, are sort of helping him along, somehow, in some way, or maybe some metaphorical sense, like they maybe represent, the light or hope or whatnot. You could have gone with that kind of an angle, and it probably would have suited the scene well. Because when someone is being tortured, the last thing you want to hear is kind of this electro dance music going on. And that's kind of what this song sounds like. You know, and this was definitely past Madonna's prime, and yeah, it just does not. She's just not up at the same level, and I'm not saying that she is a bad artist. I mean, I think she's had definitely some good, decent songs over the years, but she's, as far as choosing her for, you know, a James Bond movie, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Compared to someone like Adele, who is known for doing a little bit more slicker material. Madonna is poppy and upbeat usually. Um, she's not the kind of artist that I think you would pick for a James Bond song. So yeah, that's already out of the gate. And again, the themes are usually played within the beginning. So it really does establish sort of the tone, the direction of the rest of the film. And just already by the choice of the theme music, you can already kind of tell, oh snap, this isn't gonna be good. So yeah, I definitely would have scrapped it. There could have been multiple options that they could have gone with. Just it was just the wrong. Madonna was just the wrong artist, and the song doesn't suit the scene or the film all too well. Just because it says the things that are in the title doesn't make it relevant to what's actually going on or make it reflect the tone of the movie well. Um, and the scene it's taking place in. Uh, so that's one thing that needed to be significantly changed. Now, there's another part of the James Bond series that I think a lot of people really like about it and why they think it's a little bit more sophisticated and intelligent. Um, the writing is usually fairly strong. And it has a certain amount of wit to it. Like, James Bond's supposed to be a witty guy. He's not like someone like Vin Diesel or The Rock, or someone like uh, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's not that kind of a hero. He's not the generic action superstar. Who spews one-liners constantly and who is he's more of a smarts because he has an actual background working for the British government. So he has some kind of level of intelligence to him that wouldn't amount to these kinds of lines that they are having him say throughout this film. I mean, the lines are just unbelievably either one-liners or puns or innuendos or references. They're nothing of substance of what he's talking about. I mean, good gravy Marie, the dialogue is just, you could take all of the dialogue throughout this, and I would say a lot of it is filled with these kinds of things. Like, it's not anything of value. And at the same time, even when Bond is being a little bit more, a little bit more, how do you say, even if he is being a little bit snarky, he doesn't go, I'm going to make funny, goofy, one-liners and make a bunch of innuendos to things. There's just a certain amount of, class and sophistication that's held out throughout the series and throughout all of the Bonds. Like, if you can argue whether or not which Bond is a better representation than another, but they do have some sort of pattern, and that pattern is usually designed to be around the fact that he is intelligent and that he doesn't try to say things that don't really matter or are just plain stupid to say. So that's, I think, something important. And I think something that this film completely missed. um, and definitely needed to be replaced with a lot more wittier dialogue. Because James Bond is known for that, and he's supposed to be that kind of character. He's not Vin Diesel or, Arnold Schwarzenegger going, you, you know, um, get to the chopper. He's not that kind of a action hero. He is more. I mean, he has brawn. It's just he's got the intelligence behind him too. Um, and it's not to say that Arnold Schwarzenegger or these other actors are not as intelligent. It's just usually they're not designed to be so overly sophisticated. They just don't play very suave and sophisticated characters. They usually play just kind of the down to earth average Joe. And James Bond is not an average Joe. He's not. He's not the average Joe superhero, or a super spy, or super action hero. He's not that kind of a person. So I think it was sort of it kind of it sort of, I think, insulted the character a little, probably unintentionally, but again, something that definitely could have been tweaked. Now there's some people who complain in particular about sort of these elements that exist within the plot, the sort of ridiculousness, because there is a lot of ridiculousness in this film. Like, for example, the villain's evil scheme is sort of to create a super weapon, and that super weapon is a big gigantic laser. Now you could either argue how awesome this is or how stupid it is. I personally don't mind it as much as maybe some others do. But I think really what the plot for this film needed to do is to be a little bit more straightforward. I mean, they can have twists and turns here and there. I mean, we've seen that in James Bond's films. You could have double crossing, and all that. But the problem is that they put in kind of ridiculous ideas and concepts that it's sort of hard for the audience to follow or even understand why they would put that in there. For example, there's this one part of the plot where the villain turns himself Caucasian as a form of disguise so that nobody catches on to who he is. But then at the same time, he's treated as this like big kind of celebrity, he's featured in magazines, and he's supposed to have a lot of wealth, and things like that. But how would he, if he's really a bad guy who's supposed to be from North Korea, which is where they have the villains pretty much um, located in and part of, then the whole idea of making him Caucasian and changing his race around just for the sake of disguise doesn't really work, because how would nobody not notice this guy suddenly getting this huge amount of wealth, for no reason, or how would the British government not pick up on this guy? It does not make sense whatsoever, and it's just so goofy. This whole idea of, wait, what? He's just gonna change his race? Okay. Whereas what they could have done is they just could have kept him as a British person who works for the North Koreans. Um, and maybe he did work for the British government at some point. And he has a lot of insight as to, super weapons and things like that. And, he might be a really smart, engineer or something, and maybe, he was mad that they maybe, fired him, or, maybe he leaked some information or something, he did, you could have gone I don't know, maybe the Edward Snowden angle or something. But you could have made him an interesting villain to have a reason to side with North Korea out of all places. But at the same time, you could have done it to the point where, there's a reason as to why he's against the British government and maybe Western civilization as we know it. Maybe he doesn't like the corruption maybe within Western governments. Maybe he's, he he might be, he could have been brainwashed too, like he could have been captured while on a mission, and they never found him or went after him, and the Koreans brainwashed him somehow maybe to their side or something like that. That would have at least made sense, and wouldn't have led to a lot of goofy, unnecessary plot inconveniences. Like, he could have, he could have been on a mission, and then he was presumed dead, and they didn't go and search for him, and he was captured by the North Koreans, and they took him in as one of their own, and basically they brainwashed him or something, and he now works for them somehow. That would have been at least a little bit more convincing than having him somehow become Caucasian and somehow gain all of this power and wealth without the British noticing or catching on as to, kind of like, wait, what? There's just this guy that just randomly comes into our country somehow and gets rich. Like, it just doesn't really add up to much. So I think had they gone for the angle of, he originally worked for the British government, he maybe fled because he might have done something that they didn't like, and he ultimately gets picked up by the North Koreans by fleeing, and they might initially capture him, and then they sort of brainwash him, and he becomes one of them. Something like that would have been a little bit more convincing than, just doing some kind of bizarre changing of race. And yeah, that's just that was just the most oddest, strangest thing to me. Just have him be a double crosser. He was good at one point, and then he turned bad through maybe some form of manipulation, and him maybe not having a lot of trust in the politicians or in the government and Western civilization, something like that. Some weird, kooky man who maybe is very smart in some respects, but just doesn't understand politics or anything, and just assumes that North Korea is the best solution somehow. That would have been, I think, at least a little bit stronger. Also, there's this thing too with James Bond's character. Not only do we not usually have these really goofy one-liners and puns constantly, but we also see that there's oftentimes sort of a struggle with James Bond when he's going on his missions. There's a sense of challenge. Like, you know, he's going through everything, and you know, he manages to figure things out. And but at the same time, there is a sense of like it's a journey, and it's a process, and it's not like everything is just handed to you um, on a silver platter, and they kind of do that in this movie, um, especially in the way in which he gets out of certain situations. Like it's pretty laughable. You know, and it feels, again, it feels more of like, you know, the action hero, where you know, they get out of these really ridiculous scenarios, and you know, they don't get, you know, scratch on them, or you know, and they don't break their backs, you know. Whereas mostly with most James Bond films, there is, I feel, some sense of struggle, or you feel like that he has to achieve something at the end of the day, and that doesn't come just by, you know, I mean, everybody, you know, likes the cool cars and all of that, but at the end of the day, you know, when it comes down to the plot, you know, there is this sense of him trying to figure things out, and not everything is sort of, you know, just handed to him, and he somehow, you know, just can, you know, get away every single time. And the only time they really show the sign of struggle is really when he is when he really is being tortured in the beginning. That is the only time where we see any kind of where he is just down on his luck. So I think had they made his scenarios a little bit more um, plausible, in the sense that it's a challenge, it's not like it's easy, then we would have gotten more tension, and as a result, people would be more invested because we would want, you know, him to win. Whereas, oh, we know he's gonna win, you know, just because he's James Bond, but at the same time, we like to see a character, excuse me, go through something. So, and it gives the story weight. And unfortunately, Die Another Day didn't do that, so needed to do that. Also, the villains are just so they don't have any semblance of disguise. It's not like you suddenly they're suddenly you know, they reveal themselves, it's kind of clear. Um, Even with the one of the villains who ends up double crossing James Bond, like you can tell because she's just so monotone in the way she talks. Like you just think, yeah, she's probably a villain, you know. Uh, Whereas usually good villains, or at least ones that try to double cross, um, at least try to just kind of disguise themselves, like they give themselves a different, you know, character, so to speak. And unfortunately, they didn't do that within this film. Uh, so yeah, that definitely needed to be changed. I think that they should have either had maybe some double crossing and have them display, like, as side villains, a good act. Um, because that's how I would see it within this sort of scenario. Um, Whereas the main villain, you just kind of figure out ultimately who's the main villain. Um, and That's really uh, what I think they needed to do, because a lot of the times the villains just come off as completely flat. Um, so I think that's something that could have um, uh, been improved upon. Um, as far as anything else goes, I think those are um, really the things that needed to be changed. You could argue the practicalities of the action sequences. Are they really ridiculous? Yeah. They are fairly ridiculous. And could there have been improvements made throughout the, showcasing the visuals? Yes, absolutely. Um, uh, but uh, but that's really just depends on, you know, if you look at other James Bond films, there is a sense of, suspension of disbelief, but at the same time, um, there is a certain, like, they don't try to do it that to the point where it's so over the top, and I think this film was doing it in a really over the top way, um, which I don't think really works well for a James Bond film, since again it's supposed to be kind of smart. It's not supposed to be, just your standard action movie. So I think, had they just made a more straightforward plot, you know, had they uh, given maybe some dimension as well as some plausibility of double crossing when it comes to the villains, had they, completely dumped the idea of a guy just changing his race, um, you know, just for the sake of, yeah, disguise. Um, had they, dropped certain goofy elements that are associated with the action sequences, yeah, that could have been another thing. And yeah, they just needed to make James Bond not say a bunch of stupid lines and, make him actually a character that needs to, go through an assignment, not just somebody who's just like, walk in, yeah, defeat the villain, so easily. Um, so I think that's really the problems that this film in particular did have. Oh, and obviously the Madonna song. Just, just no, just no. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say about what I would have done with this. I mean, I know that even to, a British person siding with North Korea is a little bit goofy. At the same time, I feel that it could be plausible um, that, someone who feels like they were wronged could go to kind of such extremes and become sort of crazy. Um, it's somewhat similar to the villain of Skyfall, if you ever watched that film too. But he sort of goes, rogue, so to speak, or for himself, really. He doesn't go to an all-powerful leader, but maybe this villain has no leadership skills or something. He's just some very smart dude who can do smart stuff, which definitely North Korea needs because they don't have the same uh, amount of they just don't have that same amount of understanding of technology that like what we do, especially if you look at their internet at nighttime or their lighting at nighttime. So yeah, I think that's really uh, ultimately all I can really say um, as to what I would do with this film. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. However, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.